Hello, this is Helen Stevenson of Reformulary Group. In our first video, I spoke about how quickly the early phase of the COVID-19 pandemic escalated, but the effort to manufacture a successful vaccine happened just as quickly in relative terms. So, how did the world produce several successful vaccines for a virus that had not existed just a few months earlier? A large factor was the historic mobilization of government and pharma resources. In the United States, Operation Warp Speed had a goal of 300 million doses and made commitments of $10 billion on R&D. The initiative placed bets on 5 finalists: AstraZeneca, J&J, Merck, Moderna, and Pfizer-BioNTech. Canada used a strategic innovation fund of $2.7 billion. The fund is not COVID-19 specific, but some COVID projects were funded from it. In March of last year, the Canadian government made a commitment of $275 million for COVID-19 research. The European Union made total pledges of just over €1 billion, including a March 2020 initial commitment of €48 million towards therapeutics, diagnostics, and vaccine development. In Canada, Health Canada oversees applications for and approval of both drugs and vaccines. In the U.S., it's the U.S. Food and Drug Administration that plays a similar role. But because of the acuity of the COVID-19 crisis, 2 factors expedited the approval process for the vaccines. The first was expanded interest in clinical trials, and the second is agencies willing to consider approval on an emergency basis. Clinical trials are divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 tests for safety, Phase 2 tests for efficacy, Phase 3 tests for safety and efficacy relative to existing products. And the numbers for the major vaccine candidates were significant, with 30,000 participants and up for each trial. What's also important to note is that large-scale investment and funding allowed pharma to test at different stages of development concurrently instead of sequentially, and with no financial risk to them if they failed. There are 2 primary types of vaccines that have been developed. One we've heard a lot about, which is the newer messenger RNA, or mRNA. It works by tricking the body into producing individual viral proteins, triggering an immune response. It was pioneered by Catalin Carrico in the 1990s. COVID-19 vaccines are the first successful deployment of it. The other more conventional type is viral vector-based vaccines, which deliver a non-disease-causing virus to cells, creating a harmless piece of virus the immune system can recognize. One fact that is sometimes overlooked is that the types of vaccines that get approved greatly affect global distribution. The earliest to be approved, Pfizer and Moderna, came with logistical hurdles, namely the 2-dose requirement and cold storage requirement, which Pfizer was particularly onerous for. Those requirements have since eased up. These 2 vaccines are better suited to North America and Europe, which poses a challenge to equitable distribution around the world. The approval of Johnson & Johnson, which is 1 shot only, and AstraZeneca could help equalize global access to vaccines. We know that Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines are being used widely, but there is a sort of next wave of vaccines coming up in the regulatory pipeline. The AstraZeneca vaccine has been in use in the EU since late January, and Health Canada approved the vaccine in late February. We expect the AZ vaccine to file for approval in the US shortly. The Johnson & Johnson shot got its approval in late February, and Canada about a week later in early March. And Novo Nordisk, another promising vaccine. Part 3 of this video series will talk about some domestic missteps, vaccine production here in Canada, as well as immunity and emerging variants.